There's this book called, and I haven't read it in a long time. It's called Situated Learning. And what it is, from what I remember of it, I read it in college. When you are learning in a situated situation, you're situated, which means that you are in a position where you're around experts and you're receiving instruction from those experts. But it's not just like you're going to take a test and then move on. It's like we're actually doing the thing. We're doing the thing that actually is required for doing the thing. We're doing the process that's actually required for doing the thing that we're trying to learn. Instead of I'm administering a test and you're demonstrating that you can answer those tests in a satisfactory way and then receiving a letter grade, and then we move on to something else, and that may not ever apply to real world scenarios. There's this type of instruction that experts can use when they're trying to demonstrate something. And it's called, I have heard it called cognitive apprenticeship, which is basically an expert is going to go through the process and then like narrate their thought process and like what they're looking for and how they're thinking about it as they do it. So it's this like demonstrating style of teaching where an expert is like going through the process and they're saying, oh, here I see this. This is what I see in this scenario. And they're going through all the context and explaining their thought process behind what they're doing. And I find that that is exactly the type of thing that the online piano world needs way, way more of. Okay. It just feels in a lot of ways like here's the chord and here's the chord and here's the chord and play it like that. Or these are the notes. Let me show you how to do it. It's not tutorial. Tutorial is like step by step, paint by numbers, do the thing, and then like kind of forget the process. Like, have you ever gone through a tutorial, gotten something done, and then like when you needed to do it, maybe some time went by and you needed to do that process again? You're like, I totally forgot how to do this. So you need somebody to like show you how to do it again. That to me is like not from a pedagogical standpoint, from like a learning perspective, that's not a good learning methodology. Like that's not going to be helpful for people. So the process is more important than like remembering all these tips and tricks, right? Or remembering the songs. The process is very much what it is. So there is a thing that you do when you sit down at the piano to practice. And it's not necessarily just like watch a tutorial and like learn a song. I want to invite people to join me in a membership I'm calling it Measure by Measure. And what I'm doing is I'm picking out new music, and it's a variety of music every month. And I'm sitting down with that and walking through the process of like, okay, how would I learn this phrase? And then just going through the process of like, what I'm thinking about. And then there's things that I would say over and over and over again, but I'm just going to put those in one spot. So members get like my 6 big things that I tell everybody and that you should always do. And there's like very few things that you actually always need to do. They're things that I would like, those are the hills that I would die on. Now, that can be a hard sell for people when all they want to learn is like, I just want to learn how to play a song. If that's your approach, like if that's what you want to get out of playing the piano, I'm probably not the person that you want to learn from. No joke. Like, I'm not joking on that. I'm not trying to like be dismissive of you either, because there's lots of people who can fill that role of just teach you how to play 20 songs with the same chord progression. And they do it really well, and they can be very efficient at it, and they can make you feel like, yeah, I've got this. But if you want to explore a little bit more about like what's the thinking process here, and how do I understand this, and then how does this make it something that's repeatable, and then how do I make this practice something that's creatively an interesting thing for me to do? How do I make this practice something that's a creative experience rather than a rote experience? And there's nothing wrong with learning some things by rote. I just think if you're going to gain any kind of mastery at something, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about mastery, which is the ability to like then creatively and autonomously work through music with your own sort of journey and your own experience and your own language to put on that. When I was a kid, I was maybe 6 or 7. I used to watch the show MacGyver. And I don't know if you have ever seen MacGyver, but MacGyver was amazing at solving problems with whatever he had on hand. Okay. And there was one episode where they had to collect different pieces. There were small pieces of transparent plastic, and they had each of them had a portion of a map on it. And so when you put them all together, pressed it together, you could see the completed map. And I always just had that image in my mind. I thought that was so cool to have like this hidden map, and to have like pieces of things layered on top of one another. And so I've always thought of sheet music as having the potential to have layers added onto it, right? So as we're learning it, we're learning layer by layer. Many of those layers are just systematic approaches to how we get the music off of the page into our fingers and able to like play it, like the actual learning part that happens, so there's like very practical layers that we have to put on first. And then there's very creative layers that can go on top of that. There's emotional layers. There's, meaning that we can attach to the music that we're playing. There can be experiences where you're practicing the piano and it's exactly what you need emotionally in the moment, like to just deal with stuff. That's another layer that we can add to this music. And I'm a little bit agnostic towards what music we're playing, right? So the music that I play will just be public domain related stuff, like stuff that's available to everybody, but that not everybody wants to like sift through and find. And so I kind of find that my role there is a little bit of a curator to like kind of expose some of this interesting music that there is to play. And also my role is to help take that music and see the inspiration that's behind it. Like, what can it inspire for us creatively? I just love the idea that creativity doesn't have to be formed in a vacuum. It doesn't have to start from nothing, right? The big bang of piano creativity, I feel like, has already happened. And we need to be better at just kind of gathering up the stardust that has just been kind of strewn about the galaxy of the music literature. And so in some ways, like, I like to look at a sheet of sheet music and think of it like a constellation in a way. Like it's like this is just a way of like understanding this universe of creativity that is the piano spot. So if that's weird for you, if that makes you uncomfortable, I'm probably not the person for you to be learning from. But if you do want to like sit down with me and like learn some of this situated learning, gain some of this situated knowledge, and then kind of, it sounds a little twisted, but to get inside my brain a little bit, which I promise is at times almost boringly systematic, like slow down. Here's exactly what I'm thinking. And you'll be like, yeah, of course. But like, just to hear me say it over and over again, like things like, I'm just putting the right finger on the right note. That's all I'm thinking about right now. I say that a lot. And I think that sometimes we just need to be able to dismiss our need to make things complicated. That's one of those things. Okay. So that's what I want to say about situated learning. I will also say video is engaging. These days, especially, video is extremely engaging. Like, how much of our interaction online and with the internet is in video? Like, almost like I tend to prefer to like look for a video for some things, right? And that doesn't always have to be it. Part of Measure by Measure is that I want to do a little bit of writing every month and include that in the packet. In case there's people who prefer to learn through reading, we can get a lot out of that. And I also like to write. And so that process has been helpful for me and fun for me to explore these things. So there's different media that we can use for learning. Video is extremely engaging these days. I want to call out something that I see a little bit too much of in the piano world online, and that is that the instructional videos are maybe too informative. Hear me out. They don't leave anything up to you, the learner, right? There's things that like need to happen for you to learn how to read music. One of those things is like just identifying your own notes. Like, I'm not sure what note this is. Well, you need to figure that out. And so I don't use a MIDI keyboard. Like, I don't, like the keys that I press don't light up. I do an overhead, like you can probably even see it up there. I have an overhead camera so you can see my hands, but I don't have any like graphics pointing to those keys and like lighting up. I find that that's not going to be helpful for you. Like you're trying to skip to the point of the process where you just like have it, right? And you need to go through the practice of like seeing the notes on the page and interpreting that and finding that, right? That's the practice that we need to do. And I liken that to when I have really small students in the studio and I've been teaching piano lessons, and they will sit down at the piano, and if there's a question about like what note is it, they'll just kind of plink around and like look at my face. And I call that, I'm like, don't try to read the music off my face, right? So I try not to react with like, because they're looking for me to go, that's the one, right? They're looking for, that's the note. And I want them to like turn their head and like look at the sheet music and like actually do the process of reading. And so that's what I hope for my students. That's what I hope to deliver through Measure by Measure. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. It's not going to be like, simplified to the point where you feel infantilized. To be infantilized means to treat someone as childish. That's the way I understand that word anyway. But yeah, I don't want you to feel like you're a child. I want you to feel like you are reasonably intelligent and that you can like go through the process, and that I expect you to go through the process. But I also want you to be able to see like, okay, here's problems that I'm gleaning out of the sheet music that people who are new to this might not really see. Okay? And so that's the benefit of cognitive apprenticeship and situated learning. As we're approaching the end of the month, I'm getting done with this month's Measure by Measure material, and I'm learning so much from the process already. Like just the first issue of it is going to look different than the second issue just because I went through the process of recording the videos and editing the videos and seeing like what is maybe working and what could be better. And that to me as a practicer is important. Okay. I just love this idea that as we go through things, we iterate on them. We're going to make incremental growth as we go through the process again. One of the key parts of deliberate practice is to do things in repetition. It's an absolute must. Like it's non-negotiable. You have to do things more than once to succeed at them. So making this a monthly kind of recurring system is really just what's helpful for me. Before, what I was doing was recording a course and spending a lot of time on it and then trying to get that course in front of people. And it felt like every time I did it, I was like, I could never like let go of the course. I could never like, I wanted it to be better. I wanted to re-record it. I wanted it to have more context. And I find that would be overwhelming for people if I just made the course like too big and too long. And so what I need to do now is connect with people on more of a monthly basis, on more of like an iterative basis. Like, where are we now? If you have something that you want to get done at the piano, like if you're sitting down to practice and you have an actual goal that you want to do, try not to get distracted by a lot of things that you think you should do, right? So this is another thing I'll say is like, if you want good technique, like if you want to play scales really fast, you can practice scales. But if you don't really care, then don't start your practice session with like 15 minutes of scales. Just skip it, and go right to the thing that you want to do. Like, go right to the thing that's important to you. You know, just saying. That's my thing. That's my thing. So, yeah, if you come into measure by measure, if you're there with me, I'm not going to make you play scales. Unless you want to, then play scales. I'm going to do like a thing on scales too. Cuz I like scales. I've played scales. I think they're good. And I think I can play them pretty dang fast. But again, speed is not really what I'm trying to push here. Yeah. Yeah, again, it's like that high production value, graphic design, boop, 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 boop. Things are like that. I just get the iPad, I plug in the iPad, and I draw on the page, and I talk about it while I'm playing. And this month, as I did that, I was like, oh, there's a problem here, like when I have to turn the page and get up. So next month, my approach is going to be to get 4 measures in this space. And it might look different than what you were looking at on your sheets, but I'll provide also the almost like a practice modules thing where it's like these 4 measures are what we're talking about now, and it's all in one space, and I don't have to like shift things around and make you dizzy in the process. So I really tried to edit away any like motion in on the iPad because I didn't want to get people dizzy when they're doing that. We'll talk about dizzy at some point. But yeah, that's what I got. That's what I got this week. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be here on YouTube. I've got the studio behind me now. You can kind of see where I work, where before I was like pointing it at the wall. I'm still discovering like what I want to talk about here on YouTube, but I'm learning what I don't want to talk about, which is like, I don't want to talk about microphones. I don't want to talk about equipment. I don't want to talk about, yeah, so many things. All right. Thanks for joining me. See you next week.